an elderly woman in a bathrobe, 2 fake HOA officers at her door, and a 1945 Colt locked, loaded, and ready in her hands. You're about to hear one of the wildest HOA stories we've ever covered, a real-life standoff where bravery, corruption, and justice collided in the most unexpected way. Trust me, you're not ready for how this ends. The sun was still crawling over the hills of Lake Fern Acres when everything exploded into chaos. 2 men in crisp navy uniforms with golden HOA badges barged through the white picket fence of 82-year-old June Morrison's home. Their boots slammed against the porch steps, shaking the wind chimes into a frenzy. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, kicked over her planter. The other shouted, "Step outside, ma'am, or we'll remove you ourselves." Inside, June was by her kitchen window, hands shaking over a kettle. Her mind flashed to the day she buried her husband, to the promise she made at his grave, never back down, not even if they come wearing masks. And these men? They weren't real cops. She knew that much the moment they shoved her screen door open. "Last warning." The tall one yelled again, reaching for something at his hip. But June didn't give them a third chance. She turned, opened the drawer by the pantry, and reached for the old black case. Her late husband Tom's 1945 Colt, cleaned every Sunday, still nestled in its velvet lining. She held it with both hands. Her knees might have been fragile, but her aim never forgot. The door creaked open behind her. And then, everything froze. June stood face to face with the broad man. He was already stepping into her kitchen. He saw the Colt, and for a second, all the fake authority on his chest meant nothing. His eyes widened. And then, cut to black. Let's go back a bit. Before all this madness, before the gun and the uniforms and the loud threats, there was just June Morrison, a quiet woman with soft gray curls, warm eyes, and a voice that made even rowdy kids in the neighborhood settle down. June had lived in Lake Fern Acres for almost 5 decades. She and her husband, Tom, bought the cottage just after the war, when life was about rebuilding and making peace with pain. After Tom passed, the neighborhood changed. More gates, more rules, more power-hungry faces showing up at her door, reminding her to repaint the fence or tuck in the ivy. But she never expected that one day, they'd come not just with notices but with boots and badges. It really started with a stray kitten. 2 weeks before the attack, June had found the little guy mewling under her porch. Thin as wire and shaking with fear. She named him Pinto. Took him in. Bathed him. Fed him milk. He never left her side after that. But apparently, someone on the HOA board decided Pinto was a violation of Section 12B. No pets allowed without authorization. June never remembered that being a problem before. Every third house had a dog or a cat lounging by the window. But somehow, hers became the issue. A letter arrived. Stiff language. Cold. No signature, just HOA printed at the bottom in bold. June ignored it. She'd lived longer than most of those board members had been alive. And no way was she throwing a helpless kitten out into the cold. Then came the second letter. This one had a fine attached. $250 for unauthorized animal occupancy. Again, she tossed it aside. June's neighbor, Ellie, a sweet mom of 2 who always baked too many cookies, stopped by with concern in her eyes. "June, they're getting serious," she whispered, holding a baby on her hip. "They were talking about some enforcer thing? I don't know. Just be careful." June chuckled, rubbing Pinto's back. "I've seen worse, honey." Ellie didn't laugh. And then came the day of the lawn. June had always kept her grass tidy, not perfect, but tidy. That morning, she woke up to find 3 large orange notices stapled to her mailbox, the side of her fence, and her tree trunk. Violation, weeds over 4 inches, final warning. June stood there, staring at them. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with something else, disbelief, anger, and a heavy sense of being cornered. So she did what anyone with a stubborn heart and a war veteran husband's memory would do. She made lemonade. And cookies. And invited the neighborhood kids to sit on her porch swing, just like old times. The sun warmed their faces. Pinto meowed on the railing. Laughter filled the air again. It was a small act of defiance, but one that didn't go unnoticed. That night, someone left dog feces in her mailbox. Then a dead rat on her porch. The next morning, a bigger fine came. June didn't call the police. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of fear. Instead, she opened her garage, took out Tom's old toolbox, and started sanding the wood around her windows. fixing the hinges, cleaning the gutters. All the while, Pinto followed her around like a shadow. It wasn't about the fines anymore. It was about principle. That's when the men came. Two of them. Unmarked car. Flashing a badge that didn't quite look right. They said they were with the HOA Enforcement Division. June tilted her head. That's not a thing. They smiled without warmth. Step outside, ma'am. We're here to issue a removal. For what? You have been non-compliant. Multiple violations. You've also failed to pay your dues. We have authorization to enter and inspect the property. June closed the door slowly in their faces. She turned and walked to the kitchen. The Colt was in the drawer. But she didn't touch it yet. Instead, she called Ellie. Told her what happened. Ellie was terrified. June, you have to call the real cops. June's voice was steady. If they come back, I'll handle it. And they did come back. Harder. Angrier. They didn't wait for her to answer. They broke in. And that's where we found ourselves, at the edge of that kitchen moment, with June holding the Colt, the man halfway through the doorway, and the world about to tilt on its axis. But before she pulled the trigger, before anything could happen, Pinto let out the loudest hiss of his little life and leapt forward. And then, the screen door behind the second man slammed shut. Someone else was now on the porch. A new voice shouted. Put it down. Now. But whose voice was it? And why did the fake enforcers suddenly freeze? The voice came sharp and commanding, slicing through the air like a blade. Step away from her. Hands where I can see them. The two men froze. The taller one's foot was still half raised, about to cross into June's kitchen. The other had spun around so fast, his belt clanged against the porch railing. June didn't lower the Colt. Her arms were locked, steady, even though her heart thumped like a drum inside her chest. From the front yard, a figure emerged, calm, in control, and very clearly armed. It was Rick Dawson, the retired sheriff who lived 3 houses down. His silver hair glinted under his baseball cap, and in his hand was a Glock, pointed directly at the imposter enforcers. June didn't even breathe. Neither did the men. You two aren't on any HOA roster, Rick said slowly, walking up the porch steps with deliberate steps. And I know for a fact there ain't no such thing as an HOA enforcement division in this town. The shorter man, blonde, twitchy, started to open his mouth, but Rick barked again. On your knees. Both of you. Now. They didn't move fast enough. Rick took 2 more steps forward and chambered around. That did the trick. The 2 fakes dropped to their knees right there on June's porch. The taller one cursed under his breath, but it was quiet, like he already knew this wasn't going the way they planned. June finally exhaled, her fingers loosening slightly on the Colt's grip. She kept it at her side, but didn't put it away. Rick nodded toward her. You okay? She gave him a tiny smile. Still breathing. Can't say the same for my begonias. That turned a snort from Rick, who never much liked June's sarcasm but appreciated her grit. He kept his gun on the men and told June to go call the local police. She did. Calmly. Almost too calmly. Like she was ordering groceries, not reporting an armed break-in. But just as she reached for the phone, the power cut. All the lights in her house blinked off. The phone went dead. Even Pinto hissed and darted under the couch. June turned back to Rick. They cut the power line. Rick's jaw clenched. These aren't just HOA bullies. And that's when the wind shifted. From down the street came the low growl of an engine. Not a car. Not a truck. A van. Jet black. No plates. It rolled to a stop just past June's house, slow and deliberate, like it knew everyone was watching. And then it just sat there. Not moving. No doors opening. No windows rolling down. Rick stepped backward onto the porch, closer to June, never lowering his gun. Go back inside. Lock the back door. June hesitated. Rick didn't. Now. She obeyed. In the kitchen, she slid the back door bolt into place, yanked down the curtain, and placed the Colt on the counter just in reach. Her fingers hovered over her emergency flashlight, but she knew better than to turn it on. Pinto was still hiding. Outside, Rick's voice came again, low and tense. Don't you move. Police are on their way. But they weren't. Not yet. The power cut had likely knocked the landlines out across the block. Cell service in Lake Fern Acres had always been spotty at best. And if the intruders had a signal jammer, they had time. June crouched low near the corner of the kitchen, watching the two men through the small side window. They hadn't tried to run. Maybe they were scared. Or maybe they were waiting. Waiting for whoever was in that van. A knock came at the back door. 3 quick raps. June froze. That door opened into her garden. No one should be back there. She didn't speak. Another knock. Then silence. Then a voice. Soft. Familiar. "June? It's me. Ellie. It's okay. Open up." June stood, but didn't move to the door. That voice. It sounded like Ellie. But there was something off. A pause between words that shouldn't be there. A stiffness in the way her name was said. As if someone had heard Ellie say it before, and was mimicking it. June backed away from the door. Then the voice came again. "I brought the police. They're out front. It's safe." She didn't believe it. Not for 1 second. Ellie would have used the front door. And Ellie never knocked like that. June moved slowly to the drawer and picked the Colt back up. She didn't speak. Didn't respond. I just raised the barrel and aimed at the center of the back door. Outside, whoever was pretending to be Ellie waited another moment. Then walked away. No footsteps. Just the sound of grass bending. June returned to the window just in time to see Rick turning sharply on the porch. One of the fake enforcers had shifted, trying to run. Rick kicked him square in the chest, sent him sprawling, and re-aimed. But then the back window shattered. Glass flew like needles across June's floor. Someone had thrown something, a black, hissing canister. Smoke filled the room fast. Tear gas. June couldn't breathe. She fell to one knee, coughing, trying to hold the Colt steady. Pinto screeched and bolted up the stairs. She forced herself to crawl to the kitchen sink, opened the tap blindly, and splashed water into her eyes. Someone was coming in. The back door creaked open, real slow. She couldn't see. But she could still hear. Footsteps. One person. Heavy. Deliberate. And then a boot came into view through the gas. Black leather. Thick sole. Not Rick. Not Ellie. Not the two fakes from earlier. Someone else. And they were inside her house. The man who stepped into June's kitchen was different from the others. He wasn't pretending to be HOA. He wasn't in any uniform at all. Just a black hoodie, sleeves pushed up, and gloves, not for warmth, but for work. His build was thick and strong. He moved like someone who'd broken into houses before. And now, he was inside hers. June was still coughing, gas burning her eyes. The Colt was in her hand, but she could barely see 2 feet in front of her. Her joints screamed as she pressed herself against the cabinet for support. The gas hissed softer now, dispersing, but her vision was still swimming. The man didn't speak. He didn't need to. He was here for something or someone. And he knew what he was doing. He stepped further into the kitchen, scanning quickly. June held her breath. Her body felt like it was shutting down one limb at a time, but her grip stayed locked on the Colt. She didn't dare move. Then, as if by instinct, she rolled behind the island counter just as he passed the fridge. The man stopped. Listened. His boots creaked slightly as he turned. Then, he knocked over a chair. Deliberate. Looking for movement. Trying to flush her out. June's heart pounded against her ribs. This was her house, her rules, but in this moment, she felt like a hunted thing inside it. She gritted her teeth. And she remembered something Tom once told her. You don't have to be stronger than the intruder. You just have to know your home better than he does. She blinked fast, trying to clear her sight. The blur shifted into shapes. She saw the shadow of the man's legs pacing slowly in front of the counter. He was muttering something now, maybe counting, maybe just letting her know he wasn't rushing. That's when her fingers brushed the rubber grip of the old rolling pin she kept under the counter. 1 breath. 2. Then she launched it toward the window. It clattered hard against the wall and dropped into the sink. The man turned fast, stepped toward the sound. And that's when June stood. One eye shut, both hands braced. The Colt was up. Her finger found the trigger. The man turned. And saw her. The shot exploded through the kitchen. The Colt kicked hard against her palms. The man screamed, dropped to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Blood spread quickly across the front of his hoodie. He looked stunned, not because of the pain, but because she actually fired. He hadn't expected that. Neither had she. He scrambled backward, slipping on broken glass, dragging himself toward the back door, but June took another step forward, the Colt still aimed. "Get out of my house," she said, voice shaking but clear. He didn't argue. He bolted through the door, disappearing into the night, crashing through the hedges. June dropped the Colt onto the counter. Her legs gave way. She collapsed to her knees. She could barely breathe, but she was alive. Outside, Rick must have heard the shot. She could hear his voice yelling now. Neighbors were coming out of their houses. Porch lights blinked on. Someone shouted, "Is everyone okay?" But June didn't answer. Because just as she tried to stand again, there was a sound from upstairs. Not loud. Not violent. Just the soft, unmistakable creak of a floorboard. Someone else was in the house. Still. She glanced toward the staircase. One slow step. Then another. They weren't running. They were descending carefully. Whoever it was had waited. Waited for the chaos to come and go. Waited for June to be alone again. She rose slowly, Colt in hand, eyes locked on the stairwell. The first thing she saw was the tip of a black boot. Then the hem of black jeans. Then a gloved hand holding a small metal object. She tightened her grip. But when the full figure emerged, June didn't pull the trigger. Because it wasn't a man. It was a teenage girl. 16, maybe 17. Pale. Freckled. Hair tied tight behind her head. Dressed just like the intruder before, but smaller, thinner. The girl didn't speak. She just stood there at the foot of the stairs, eyes flicking between June and the Colt. No panic. No fear. Just be quiet. Calculated. June didn't lower the gun. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head. Didn't answer. June took a step forward. "What do you want?" Finally, the girl spoke, soft and slow. "You weren't supposed to be home." June blinked. "Excuse me?" The girl took a slow step forward, raising the metal object in her hand. It was a phone, but with a wire adapter attached to it. Not a weapon, but not innocent either. "You were supposed to be at church," the girl said. "Like every Sunday." It hit June then. They had been watching her. Tracking her habits. Timing her movements. This wasn't about Pinto. Or lawn. Or an HOA violation. It was a setup. The girl looked over her shoulder toward the broken back window. Then she whispered something that chilled June to the bone. "I told them it was too soon." Before June could respond, a loud, mechanical clang came from the garage. The sound of a crowbar hitting metal. Another intruder. Or two. Maybe more. They weren't done. And neither was this night. The garage door trembled again, another hit from outside. The metal creaked as though it might buckle. June flinched, still holding the Colt, now slick with sweat in her hands. The girl in front of her didn't move. She stood still at the bottom of the stairs, that strange, eerie calm still painted across her young face. June didn't lower her weapon. "You need to leave," she warned, voice hoarse from the gas, lungs still raw. But the girl only blinked, as if the danger in the room wasn't real to her. As if she were watching a movie and not living it. "You won't shoot me," she said. June's hand shook, just slightly. "You sure about that?" she whispered back. Then, another bang, harder this time. The whole house seemed to exhale. A piece of the ceiling dust flaked down above June's head. The intruders in the garage weren't just trying to get in. They were going to succeed. The girl turned her head toward the sound. "We told them not to use force. That wasn't the deal." June's brows furrowed. "Deal with whom?" The girl took a cautious step closer, her hands still visible, holding only the phone and that wire. "You weren't the target," she said. "It was just supposed to scare you. Maybe move you out. You weren't even supposed to get hurt." Another bang. Closer now. June had to act. "Get behind me," she ordered. The girl hesitated, then slowly stepped toward June. Her boots crunched over the broken glass, careful not to make a sound. There was no more smugness in her face, just confusion. Doubt. Maybe even regret. June moved toward the kitchen door, Colt up, steps light. "You got a name?" she asked without looking. The girl paused. "Leah." "All right, Leah. If you want to live through the next 5 minutes, you stay quiet, and you follow my lead." Leah nodded. Then, with a splintering crack, the side door to the garage caved inward. The deadbolt snapped, and the wooden frame splintered as two dark figures poured in like shadows. Both wore masks this time, military-style balaclavas, dark gloves, and headlamps strapped around their brows but left off. They moved like they'd done this before. Burglars? No. Too organized. Leah ducked behind the kitchen island. June dropped low beside the refrigerator, the Colt still raised and ready. She counted their steps by the sound. One of them spoke. "She's got the gun. She shot Kyle." "Didn't kill him," the other answered. "Still, the boss isn't going to like it." A pause. "Where's the girl?" June's stomach twisted. Leah was the reason they were here. She didn't have time to ask why. The shorter man, tactical vest over a long-sleeved shirt, moved toward the hallway. The taller one began opening cabinets in the kitchen, gun in one hand, the other flipping things out carelessly. June held her breath. The tall man moved toward the island. He rounded the corner. And stopped. Leah stared up at him, frozen. He reached down, grabbed her by the collar, and yanked her to her feet. "You think you get to change the plan?" "I didn't sign up for this," Leah spat. "Too late." June rose. "Drop her." The man turned, and got an eyeful of a Colt barrel aimed straight at his head. "I said drop her." But he didn't. Instead, he shoved Leah forward. Straight into June. The collision knocked June off balance. Her finger squeezed the trigger, but missed. The gunshot tore through the cabinet above their heads, spraying wood chips. The other man rushed from the hallway. June pushed Leah behind her again and reset her stance. The taller man was already lunging. She fired again. This time, she hit his leg. He screamed, dropping to the floor, blood pouring from the gash in his thigh. The second man ducked behind the couch and returned fire. Glass shattered. June dropped, crawling with Leah through the narrow space beside the table. The living room window burst in a spray of shards. Rick's voice came bellowing from outside. "Please. Hands where I can see them." Flashlights streaked through the darkness. Then another gunshot. From outside. Not June's. Not the intruder's. A different sound entirely. Sharper. Louder. Followed by a scream. Not a man's. A woman's. "Ellie." June's eyes widened. She turned toward the front of the house, but Leah yanked her back. "Wait." June stared at the girl. "They shot her?" Leah shook her head. No, it's worse." Outside, someone else was moving now. Quick steps. Not police. Not Rick. "More people?" "How many of you are there?" June whispered. Leah didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the basement door. June hesitated. "No one goes down there but me." "If you want to survive the night," Leah said, her voice trembling now, "you're going to need what's down there." June narrowed her eyes. "What's down there?" But Leah didn't reply. She just turned and opened the door, disappearing into the darkness below. And June had a decision to make. Trust the girl. Or go find out who just screamed outside. Before it was too late. June stood at the edge of the basement steps, heart pounding, the Colt still clutched in her hand. The darkness below felt deeper than it should, quiet and cold, as though it hadn't been disturbed in years. Leah had already disappeared into the shadows, her boots echoing on the wooden steps. Behind her, the house was chaos. Broken glass crunched under her slippers. Blood smeared the floor. The two masked intruders had gone still, one unconscious, the other dragged away by who knows who. And outside? Ellie had screamed. That sound still rang in June's ears like a church bell on a funeral morning. She had never felt this torn, protect what's left inside. Or fight for the people she loved outside. She tightened her grip and moved down the stairs. The basement smelled of old wood, must, and iron. Tom's workbench was still there, covered with dusty tools and tangled wires. Shelves lined the walls, filled with yellowing newspapers, storm lanterns, and mason jars from a time when people preserved their own fruit and vegetables. A single bulb dangled overhead, flickering weakly. In the far corner, Leah was kneeling beside a wooden chest, one June hadn't opened since the year Tom died. She watched as Leah slowly unlatched the old brass locks and pushed the lid open with both hands. Inside, wrapped in cloth and plastic, was what looked like a metal case. June didn't recognize it. Not at first. "What is that?" she asked, stepping closer. Leah pulled it out with a grunt. It's a hard drive. One of the original backups. The ones Tom used for the security network. June squinted. Tom's cameras? He didn't just run cameras, June. He was documenting. All of it. All of what? The board. The bribes. The money that's been changing hands in Lake Fernacres since before you realized it started going bad. June stared at her, stunned. What do you mean, money changing hands? Leah stood up. They've been using this neighborhood. Laundering money through property violations. Inflated fines. Dummy companies tied to the HOA. And anyone who pushes back? She nodded toward the ceiling. They get visits. June's throat went dry. Why do you know this? Leah paused. Because my brother found it. He cracked into their server. He was a whistleblower. He was going to go public. But they found out. They came for him. They said if I didn't help, they'd bury him and me too. June swallowed hard. So you helped set me up? Leah nodded, shame darkening her face. At first. But I didn't know what they'd really do. Not like this. June looked down at the hard drive. Is this enough to stop them? Leah shook her head. No. Not alone. But it's proof. And it's tied to a name. The one funding it all. Another crash echoed from above. Voices. Male. Angry. Someone shouted Rick's name. Then. A gunshot. June bolted for the stairs. She turned just long enough to bark, bring the drive. Now. They burst into the main hallway just in time to see a figure standing over Rick on the porch, his hat tossed aside, blood seeping from his shoulder. Two other men stood in the yard, one of them holding what looked like a cattle prod, the other with a scoped rifle slung across his back. Rick groaned on the floor, conscious but pinned. June raised her Colt. Let him go. The man on the porch turned. His face was uncovered, clean-cut, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of polished arrogance only money could buy. His eyes locked onto June's, and he gave a smile that didn't reach them. You must be Mrs. Morrison. She didn't flinch. You've got 5 seconds. He lifted both hands slowly, mockingly. Oh, I think you misunderstand the situation. Then he nodded. The man with the cattle prod stepped toward the house. June was fired. The bullet caught the man in the leg, dropping him with a scream. The others ducked behind the stone wall near the driveway. June dropped to a crouch as bullets shattered her front windows. Leah pulled Rick behind the couch, her small hands surprisingly strong. He needs help. I know, June said. More shots fired. The plaster rained from the ceiling. The entire house groaned under the weight of violence. June crawled toward the corner table near the fireplace. Inside its drawer was Tom's old radio, battery-powered. If the phones were down, maybe the signal would still work. She twisted the dial. Static. More static. Then. This is County Dispatch. Do you copy? June pressed the button. This is 82 Lake Fernacres. Officer down. Home invasion. Armed hostiles on site. The static returned. Then, copy that. Units en route. ETA 10 minutes. Hold position. 10 minutes. 10 minutes could be forever. She turned back toward the porch. The polished man in the yard was now speaking into a small radio of his own. He looked up at the house, then said something June couldn't hear. Then, he lit a match. And dropped it. The dry bushes along the porch flared to life. The fire spread fast. Smoke curled toward the windows, hungry and wild. June looked at Leah. We need to go. Now. But Leah shook her head. Not yet. What are you talking about? There's someone else here, Leah whispered. I saw him. When we were in the basement. June froze. Who? A boy. Younger than me. Locked in the storage room. June's heart lurched. Why didn't you say anything? I thought he was part of them at first. But he's not. He was scared. The smoke reached the hallway. Flames licked at the walls now. The heat pulsed against their skin. They didn't have time. June clenched her jaw. Where? Back hallway. Left of the laundry room. Without another word, June sprinted through the smoke, Leah on her heels. Pinto darted across the hallway, screeching as smoke clouded the air. They reached the door. Locked. June aimed and shot the handle. The wood burst open. Inside, curled up in a ball beneath a shelf, was a boy. Maybe 10. Dusty. Eyes swollen from crying. He looked up at them and whispered, "Please don't hurt me." June's heart cracked. She knelt beside him. "No one's going to hurt you, baby. You're coming with us." Flames roared behind them. And then, a final blast rocked the house. The back wall collapsed in on itself. And through the smoke and fire, a new figure stepped in. Even Leah gasped. Because they knew who it was. And it wasn't over yet. He stepped through the blaze like it was nothing. Tall. Built like a wall. Head shaved, eyes like coal. He wore no mask, no gear. Just a dark green jacket with the sleeves rolled and a jagged scar running from his left ear to his jaw. A heavy pistol hung loosely in his grip, and he carried himself with the calm of someone who had killed before, and didn't lose sleep over it. June knew instantly, this was the man behind it all. The one Leah hadn't named. The one everyone answered to. His eyes swept over the room, scanning the smoke, the broken glass, and the blood. He didn't flinch when his gaze landed on June. He didn't blink when he saw Leah or the boy cowering behind her. He just kept walking, slow and deliberate. June raised her Colt. "That's far enough." But the man didn't stop. Leah pulled the boy tighter against her chest. "Don't let him near us," she whispered. The man spoke, finally. His voice was smooth, almost fatherly. "You've caused a lot of trouble tonight, Mrs. Morrison. All we wanted was a clean exit. No noise. Just a quiet transfer of assets. But you had to go and start shooting." June didn't lower the gun. "You call this quiet?" He smiled. "You're braver than most. I'll give you that." The flames roared louder behind him. Part of the ceiling cracked and fell. The wallpaper near the window curled and blackened. Smoke swirled between them, but June held her ground. "I don't care who you are," she said. "You take one more step, and I will end you right here in my hallway." But that only made him grin wider. "I was trained by people who shoot better than you ever could." "Tom trained me," June snapped back. "He fought in 3 wars. He taught me to shoot with my eyes closed." The man tilted his head. "And yet here we are. House burning down. Officer bleeding out on your porch. And you're cornered." He took one final step. And that was enough. June pulled her trigger. The shot rang out loud, deafening. The bullet hit him square in the shoulder. He staggered but didn't fall. His gun fired once, wild, off to the side, then clattered to the floor as he grunted and reached for the wound. June didn't wait. She kicked the side table toward him with all the strength in her legs. It smashed into his knees. He buckled, falling hard onto his back. Leah pulled the boy behind a chair. June walked forward, Colt still up. But before she could close the space, another voice roared from the front yard. "Down. Hands up. Now. Please. Real ones." Dozens. Red and blue lights lit up the smoke like a firestorm. SWAT officers burst through the front door, guns raised. One rushed toward Rick, another toward June. "Drop the weapon." She froze. Then gently set the Colt on the carpet and raised her hands. The officers flooded in, covering the fallen man, pulling June aside, and helping Leah and the boy out of the smoke. Everything blurred. Hands on her shoulders. Flashes. A medic over Rick. Oxygen masks. Stretchers. Sirens. Then, quiet. June sat on the back of an ambulance, a blanket draped over her shoulders, Pinto curled in her lap, dirty and shaking but alive. Leah sat beside her, the boy resting against her side, fast asleep for the first time in God knows how long. Across the lawn, officers hauled the masked men into the back of patrol cars. The man with the scar was cuffed, bruised, bleeding, and laughing, some twisted sound that echoed down the block until the doors slammed shut behind him. Rick was alive. Stable. Tough as ever. And June? She hadn't lost a single ounce of fire. A detective approached, crouching beside her. "We've got enough evidence from that drive to bring down half the board. Maybe more. Whatever your husband was doing. It was bigger than anyone knew." June nodded. "Tom always said it'd come back around one day." She looked out at what was left of her house. Half the porch was gone. The kitchen was scorched. The front door blown wide open. But it was still hers. And she was still standing. The detective tilted his head. "You know, that Colt? It's a war relic. Might have saved a lot of people tonight." June smiled softly. "It saved me. And maybe this place too." He stood, ready to walk away. but paused. "Do you ever think about leaving? After all this?" She looked around. At the neighbors gathered nearby, shaken but alive. At Ellie, patched up and holding her kids close. At Rick, waving weakly from his stretcher. At Leah and the boy, 2 kids who hadn't known safety until now. June shook her head. "No," she said. "This is my home. They just forgot who they were messing with." The detective grinned and walked away. And June Morrison sat quietly in the rising light of dawn. Her Colt in the evidence bag. Her chin high. And not a single trace of fear in her eyes. They thought they could intimidate an old woman out of her home, but June Morrison showed them what real strength looks like. If this story shook you like it did us, go ahead and tap that like button, drop a comment if you've ever faced HOA madness, and don't forget to subscribe. Because of these stories? They're raw. They're real. And we're just getting started. Stay sharp, and protect your peace.